Alright, hi, my name is Brian with Group 13. We're just going to do a quick code review today just to kind of show how everyone's code came together to make our program work. While Eclipse is loading up here, our game is called FirstToFour. It's basically a version of Connect 4, if you've ever played that game, which I'm sure most of you have. I'll just wait for this to load up here. And I'll just open up everything in the project here, close these first. Okay, down here, SCR215, source. Just refresh this, make sure all of my code is here. There we go. Default package, okay, and I'll just open each of these up here. Alright, so we'll start with the main class, I guess, which basically in this program just simply kind of calls the GUI application here, which is going to really be the main component of this program that brings everything together. Let me minimize some of this here so the code we can make bigger. Okay, so the GUI is the main one here, and I also have a GUI test, which is essentially the same exact code, except I've implemented the main method just to run within this file so it can run on its own. Also with this, it's also going to run in the background here. I'll show you in a little bit too because there's a lot of code to go through here, but basically it's going to run a representation of the backend grid that kind of keeps track of the tokens and whatnot in the grid, and it will run it in the console while the game is working. So for testing purposes it's handy to have so you can kind of keep an eye on what's going on, make sure everything's working properly. And I guess I will start with this since it's pretty much the same as the actual GUI class. We'll just kind of go through this just to kind of explain what everything does in this. So at the top here, we're just starting up our class. We're extending JFrame and also implementing the action listener interface. Basically, there's going to be a lot of buttons that need to respond to user clicks and whatnot, so that's why we need that here. At the top we have some final variables here, and just basically things it's just easy to maintain the code in the future. There's a lot of references to these, so it's easy to just change it right up here. We're going to have a grid created here, which while we're on that I can actually go to the grid class. Basically the grid is a 2D array or a matrix which will take in tokens, which are essentially the game pieces, or the actual game pieces that you normally drop in if you were physically playing the game. So yes, this matrix takes in tokens, and the grid basically is going to keep track of where the pieces are, and it's also, you can kind of think of it as a smart grid. It's also going to check to see the different positions to make sure, or just to make sure that you're using legal moves, and also it's going to check to see that or to see if if one of the players wins. So we'll go through that in a little bit here. Back over to the GUI. Okay, so after that, we're also going to create a token array. Now, overall, this board is about it's 6 spaces high, 7 spaces wide. So in total, you can have up to 42 tokens if the board is filled. Therefore, we just make an array for 42 separate tokens here. And that way, if the board is filled, you'll definitely have enough here. We're going to create our players, which are definitely important. The player is going to have the option when you play the game to create their username, select a color for their game pieces, and they're also going to keep track of their win, loss, and draw count, because you can play multiple rounds of this game as long as you want, and the game will keep track of how many wins and losses you have, etc. Okay, next we have the turn counter, which is basically just going to keep track of the number of turns as each player goes back and forth. Let me just open up this class here. So pretty simple. Basically just initiates the turn to number 1. We have a getter method, which will just return the count, and then a setter method, which will help to reset that. Basically, when the program's running, every player's turn is just increasing, and the program's going to check whether the turn number is odd or even, which will determine basically which player's turn it is. Alright, after that, there's a logo for the image, which you'll see shortly, and it's basically just where we store the logo for the first title screen. Next, we're going to be getting into some of the different Java Swing and Auth components here. So what I'll do actually, let me just run the program really quick just to kind of give you guys an idea what this is supposed to look like. Let me just drag it over here. Okay. So this is the first screen here. We have a begin button, which will bring us to the next menu. We have some instructions that are handy just in case you don't know how to play. Info button, which just gives you some information on the creators and the class and everything here, and an exit button if you'd like to close. Go ahead and do begin. So first, we'll just basically enter name here. Just for example, I'll just do player 1. You can choose your color of your piece you want here, so I'll go with orange. Do player 2, and let's do blue. And these buttons are essentially the same. You can still pull up in the instructions or info really whenever you'd like. So we'll do let's play. And next you have the game board here. So essentially what you want to do is use these drop buttons here. These are also buttons here, but they are actually not clickable. If you see they don't do anything, you have to use the drop buttons up here, which will fill it from the top to the bottom, just so if you've ever played Connect 4 before, it's the same idea. So we'll drop some pieces in here, and actually I'm in the test program, so you can actually see to the side here, the console opened up. It's actually going to show you a kind of representation of the grid. So every time you drop a piece, the first letter of your color is what fills the matrix here. So you can see an uppercase O here. If I drop another piece, it tells you turn 2. We have a lowercase b for blue, and it'll just keep basically doing the same thing as we play. So I'll just kind of fill a bunch of random spaces here until it tells us someone wins or if we get a draw, which we'll get to those algorithms in just a second here. We must have some winner. Oh, we got a win. Okay. Let's see if we can find where it is. So player 1, which, oh, we have a diagonal right here. So that's what it caught. All right. So when you click OK, the stats actually get updated up here. So wins, lost, ties. So player 1 now has 1 win. Player 2 has no wins and a loss. And then you can basically just keep playing as much as you want, and it will keep track. You can also, there's a concede button here. So if you just want to kind of forfeit the round for any reason, you can press that and it will forfeit your turn. Stats increase accordingly. And then whenever you're done, you can just press exit to close out of that. And yeah, this console's nice. It keeps track of everything here. So during testing, it was definitely useful for getting the check win algorithms and everything to work. Okay, so after that, I mean, this is really just kind of straightforward. We have different J labels for, setting up the different labels for text. We have some text fields, which is for the color, or the name input rather, on screen 2. Here we have a string array for colors, which is basically just to give you the color choices for a J combo box, which was the drop-down menu you saw. Some buttons here, screen 2 buttons, screen 3 buttons. Alright, so inner panels, what I did is basically to set up the layouts here. So you have 3 main panels, which are right down here. One is for screen 1, screen 2, screen 3, and these are basically just kind of like the overlay for each screen. And then within that, there's certain panels that'll have different layouts and whatnot, so you can kind of organize your components where you'd like them. And yes, so this one here is important. We have a grid button called Game Array, and this is basically those whole bunch of buttons you saw on the third screen. That's basically the array that keeps all of your buttons. And this is kind of like the array I showed you earlier up here, the actual token array. It's essentially the same thing. The tokens kind of keep track of the backend information. The game array kind of keeps track of the actual GUI pieces, which will allow you to change the image and whatnot for each piece, so, associated with the colors. So I'll show you that class really quick here. Alright, so yeah, basically you can also assign this a value. So the value I just assigned 0 through 41, which is the indexes. So an array basically 1 to 42. The indexes would be 0 through 41. So each one's going to be assigned its own unique value. Rows and columns, which will associate to the matrix on the main grid class, just to kind of give you an idea where it is in the actual matrix. We also have here is empty, which is basically going to show you whether the space that the button, it'll have a clear image on it if it hasn't been used yet. If it gets a color image, it's no longer empty, so it would return false. And we set all of the image icons right here. Getter and setters for pretty much everything. You can set the image icons. Those get the image icons. This is the set image. So if you need to change, or basically the game will use to change each piece depending on the player's turn. This is the method that will be called, depending on which color the player has choose, it'll set the icon to the color that corresponds with that. Alright, moving right along here. So this, for testing, this is just where I put the main method. It's essentially the same as the main class here, which we just kind of separated for the sake of having the actual program. The constructor for this, so basically it's going to create your player objects, it's going to create your turn counter. It's also going to fill the token array, the array will be filled with pretty much empty tokens to begin with. We're going to design the first panel and design the second panel. This right here actually is something that was commented out, so I will remove that right now actually. The third panel is actually designed later on for the game piece here. We also add listeners, which is a method I will scroll down to right now. Let's keep scrolling. Here we go, add listeners. So basically this is all of our buttons. Basically all the buttons here are going to get listeners for clicks on that. So if you don't add these listeners, then the buttons aren't going to respond no matter what you do in the action event method, which is above, and we'll get to in just a moment. Alright, it's going to set the title of the JFrame FirstToFour version, and then plus the version, which was one of the variables up top, so you can kind of easily edit that. Sets the size. It's going to set it resizable false, so that you can't kind of click and drag to resize it, because some weird things will probably happen if you're able to do that. Make sure that the program stops running if you click the X button on the JFrame. And it's also going to add the first main panel, so that'll basically create the first screen that you see when the program is launched. And you want to set it visible true so you can see that. If you didn't have that, it'd just be kind of running in the background. Alright, the action performed, which is basically what's going to tell the action listener what to do if the button is clicked. So we'll go through these really quick. Basically, you create an object that'll get the source. Actually, Sophia did a lot of this in our group, which was definitely helpful to get this all organized here. Okay, so first one here, screen 1, begin button. So yeah, basically all you do is when you want to click that, it'll move you to the next screen. It's going to remove the first one, add the second one, set the size for it, set it visible. It's pretty straightforward with that. Instruction button is going to call the message box button, which is basically, I could scroll down, but it's pretty simple. It's just, it pops open a J option pane box. You can type in a message as a string here, whatever you'd like, and then also a title, which shows up at the top of the box. So basically the title here is instructions, and then you just fill out whatever you'd like for instructions and text here. Info button is the exact same thing, different message in the box, but it's still just going to pop open a J option pane. Alright, exit button, system.exit 0, that is basically just what you use to close the program, just to kill it completely, so that'll be tied to any exit button in the program. So once you're in the next screen, your play button, so what that is going to do is it's going to get a lot of information. So remember, you have to fill out the name, the colors, and basically it's also going to check to make sure that both colors don't pick the, or both players don't pick the same color, otherwise that'd be pretty confusing. So it does check for that. If for any reason it does sense that you have the same colors, you're going to get a message box saying that you have to choose a different color, and you basically have to go back and try again. But it's going to record the names here. So yeah, you can see right here the references to our player objects. You set the name for whatever is in the right up here. So name one, player one name dot get text. So it's going to pull a text from those text fields, assign them to our objects as well as the colors. Okay. So moving along, instructions again, info, we've already went over those. They do the same thing. Exit, same thing. So the concede button, that one is basically automatically just going to tell the stats to give a loss to the person who clicks the concede during their turn and a win to the person who's it's not their turn. So yeah, basically you'll get a J option message box here that's just going to tell you what's happening when you click that. We basically adjust the stats tracker there and adjust the values within the player classes as well. Also, your turn counter here is also going to reset, so set player turn to 1. So that just kind of gets it back, so it's not just infinitely counting no matter how many rounds you do. Alright, and let's see here. Oh yeah, and this if-else statement is just kind of, you can see if the player turn is even, it'll basically say player 2 is the one forfeiting. If it's an odd number, it'll be player 1 that's forfeiting. So that's all this if-else statement is. Alright, so when we get to screen 3, let's see. So info, instructions are exactly the same. And sorry, the concede button was also on screen 3. Exit's the same. Alright, so our drop buttons, these essentially, there's a lot of them here. Basically, you're going to have 7 of them above the game board. And what these are going to do is kind of go through a process just to see where the piece should show up within the column if it's checking available spaces. So basically, what it's going to do is these numbers here, if you were to look at the grid, if you just picture a matrix, basically that's going to be 7 wide and 6 tall. If you kind of read it like a book, so you start 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that would be the top row, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 would be the second row, and so on. That's what these numbers correspond to. They're actually the values that I showed you earlier in the grid button class. That's these. So it's just kind of keeping each individual one have a different number. It's a little bit quicker than doing the rows and columns. So that's basically what that is. I just kind of drew out the grid with these numbers to kind of keep track of it. And what's happening, let me just, where did I lost my spot here? There we are. So what it's doing is it's working its way from the bottom. It first checks in the first column 35, 28, 21, 14, 7, and 0 are all of the available spaces from the bottom to the top. So it always checks the bottom first. If it's empty, it's going to drop the piece there. If that one's full, it's going to go to the next one on top of that. If it's empty, it'll drop the piece there. And this drop piece method is definitely important as well, which I'll get to in a moment. But that basically kind of uses the grid class to check for a legal move and everything like that. So all of your drop buttons are essentially going to use that same pattern. The numbers just kind of correspond to whichever row, or sorry, rather column that they're in. Design main panel, so this is for the screen 1 here. This basically just kind of puts all of those swing elements together. So it puts buttons into button panel, image in its own image panel, everything like that here. And that's the layouts here. So flow layout is typically the default layout. I just put that on there so I kind of know what's going on. But basically flow layout just takes whatever you want to put in it. It kind of fits it best as it can from left to right. If there's anything extra, it'll put it below it, so it's kind of like reading a book. The flow layout, or sorry, the box layout down here, that one is kind of more picking and choosing which side you want to put that on. So when you're creating a box layout, it takes whichever panel that you're going to be using, and then it also makes you choose a axis basically. So y-axis means it's going to kind of move things from top to bottom going along a y-axis. Vertical glue, that's just something there you can kind of put some pillow space in between each of the components so they're not right next to each other. So I just added that just to make it look a little bit more appealing. And then you basically add, your panels to the main panel itself. So the order of these, if you see, you have the actual inner panels are the first three here, and then the main panel adds all of those inner panels to the actual the main panel for screen 1. And it's essentially the same process for panel 2 and panel 3. It's the same idea, you're just kind of putting everything together. Yep, here's panel 3. And let's see here. Yeah, so panel 3 has just a little bit extra here. This is basically just setting up the stats panel at the top here, so it kind of initiates the individual values, which are going to be 0 to start the game. And the game board panel, so this is the kind of the grid of all the empty buttons you'll see on screen 3. We did a grid layout, which is basically kind of putting everything in exactly what it sounds like, a grid. So 6 tall, 7 wide. And this for loop here is basically just kind of creating 42 separate buttons and kind of initiating them as the grid buttons here. It's also going to set the individual columns and rows, so it'll kind of give you those numbers if you wanted to reference it, where it is at the actual indexes in the matrix. And once that's all set up, then it just adds the game board panel to the actual display. Or actually, sorry, rather, this one is adding each individual, it's within the loop, so it's adding each individual button to the game board panel, and then in the main panel it'll add that game board in. So add listeners, we've already gone over that. And here's some more comments from something else we were using during testing I can get rid of. Comments. Alright, so this is the message box method that I gave you pretty earlier. It just throws the J option panes, and it just basically gives you the option to do a string message and a title. J option pane dot plain message is the option that really just gives you an OK button and just a plain message. There are other ones as well. I can't remember off the top of my head, but they will give you choices for yes and no buttons and things like that. Turn counter. So these borrow methods here are in the get player turn label. They're basically there if you want to call, get any information from any of the objects we've created, so like the turn counter, player 1, player 2, and then also the player turn label, which is the one that kind of alternates between telling you which player's turn it is on the display. If you need to reference those within any other class outside of this GUI class, it's useful to have these methods so that you can actually access that info. Alright, so the drop piece method, yeah, so this one is basically going to be dropping the pieces into the board. It's basically going to, let's see here, it's going to set the value, so the color, it'll first tell the grid button class which color to choose for it. It's going to set that image for the actual icon, so that we'll have an image to show up. It changes the is empty option, so that was true to start with because it was empty. It's now false because it's full. It's going to set the owner to the player name. It's going to set the color for the player to the color that we've chosen. And it's also going to set the position as well, which is basically going to get the row and column. And then grid, we're going to place the token. So this is basically creating a token and placing it there in the back end checking program so that we have it there as well, so that we can use that for testing. So player turn, set text. Yep, so that's just going to reverse the player, the turn indicator there, telling you which player's turn it is. So that'll just alternate as you go. And this if-else statement is, again, just dependent on which player's turn it actually is. Check win procedure. So this is the code where we actually use the algorithms that will be checking for winners either horizontally, vertically, or diagonally. So there's a few things that happen in the check win procedure. You can kind of think of this as after every move. This would be something if there were a referee, they're just kind of checking all the possible things to see, what should happen next. Alright, so before we dive too much into it, I'll actually go over to our grid class, which is where the actual algorithms are for checking the win. Let's see here, grid. So we'll scroll down to those. All right, winner methods. So a lot of these were done by Kyle and Ives, so great work on these. We tweaked a couple little things with the index things, but they seem to be working great now. So check winner vertical, it's going to output the string or the owner of the token that it detects as the winning piece that it checks. So that would basically be useful. It's either going to return null if there's no winner for vertical, or it'll return this player's name if there was a winner. So it's basically going to just iterate through the matrix, and it's basically checking for 4 in a row. So you can kind of take a look at the code there. It's pretty straightforward. It has a counter here. So basically, what it's doing is it's checking if it sees one that's basically it has one, and then the next one vertically is also the same color. It adds the one to the counter. If it sees another one in the next row that's the same color, then it adds another one to the count until it eventually gets to 4, which declares a winner. Same basic idea for the check horizontal. We just kind of switch some of the row and column information around. That's basically going to instead of kind of going through rows, now you're going through the columns for horizontally, and it's the same exact idea. Checking for 4 in a row, the count increases. Now diagonal was a little bit of a tricky one. This one kind of works a little bit different. So this one is also going to iterate through the loop, and what it does is there's really 2 kind of ways you can check for a diagonal. So if you have a diagonal, if you're starting from the top of any diagonal 4 in a row, it's either going to move down to the right or down left. So either down and to the right or down and to the left. So first is checking for the down and to the right diagonals. Basically, it's going to search for anyone that has you increment the row and column for the diagonal for this. So if you have one that is +1, +2, and +3 here, all of these 4 options are all not null, which means they have pieces in each spot. It's then going to get the color of each of these pieces. So it'll call the token class to get the color for each piece. We're going to set these to integers here since our colors are represented by integer numbers. And then we're going to check to see if all of these are equal to the original token, the color of the original token that we were checking. If all check out, we're going to return the name of the winner. If not, then we're going to check for a down left diagonal. It's essentially the same idea, except this time we are incrementing the rows and decreasing the columns. So if you're moving down a row and then over to the left a column each time. And yeah, same idea. Gets the colors, checks them all, see if they're all equal. If not, if you go through both of these loops and you don't get a name, then it will just return null, and you don't have a winner. The game will continue. So that's basically our algorithms for the checking for the winners. So basically, yeah, it's going to start by checking for a horizontal, and if it finds something, it's going to declare a winner. And this if statement is here to increment the stats checker there for player 1 and player 2 for win and loss. And let's see here. Yeah, so this is just setting the actual numbers to the stats checker. It's going to clear the board for the next game, or the next round rather. It's going to make sure it says the right player's name to start with, and it also resets the turn counter. Okay, and this for loop here, let's see this one. Oh, it clears our game array buttons. Yeah, so these are the actual GUI buttons here. It's actually going to clear the image on every single one of them so that we can start over again. It also sets all of them except empty to true since they are now empty again. Okay, let's see. And then basically the same exact process for check winner vertical. It's going to go through the exact same process I just mentioned here, except now it's checking for a vertical 4 in a row. And then finally the exact same process for checking for a diagonal win. So it always starts checking horizontal first, vertical, and then diagonal. And it does this after every single move of the game. If you end up filling up the entire game board, then you're going to get a draw. If there's no winners, it'll basically give you a draw. It's going to add a draw count to the stats checker there for player 1 and player 2. And again, it's going to reset everything so that you can basically start over again. And yeah, here's the actually callsy is draw method here. Here's the actual method. So it basically it'll basically just kind of loop through here. For the game array, is a draw false. Yeah, so it's just setting all of them to empty there. It's just another loop. Yep, and then and it returns if it's a draw, either true or false on that. So yeah, we just basically went through the entire GUI class here. So let me just make sure I didn't miss anything here. I'll just kind of go through them quick. So we have the turn counter, just simple, keeps track of the turns. Token class, which will give you the color, row, and column, and the owner of each piece. Player class, which keeps track of name, color, wins, loss, and draw count. Main, which runs the GUI. The GUI test, which is nice because it gives you that console display while you're running it for testing. The GUI, which is just the same exact thing, except it's basically going to be the main program without some of the testing aspects in it. Grid buttons, and the actual grid itself. All right, well, hope that was helpful. Thanks, guys.